Keith Rothwell. That's the name of the bloke who lived here, all right. He pointed over to the house. Arbeck Farm, it's called. A farmer? Nay, sir, accountant. Some sort of businessman, any road. One of the constables found a light switch and turned on the bare bulb, which became a foundation for the brighter light of Darby's video camera. Most regions didn't use video because it was hard to get good enough quality, but Peter Darby was a hardware junkie, forever experimenting. Banks turned his attention back to the scene. The place looked as if it had once been a large stone Yorkshire barn with double doors and a hayloft, called a field house in those parts. Originally, it would have been used to keep the cows inside between November and May and to store fodder, but Rothwell seemed to have converted it into a garage. To Banks's right, a silver-grey BMW, parked at a slight angle, took up about half the space. Beyond the car, against the far wall, a number of metal shelf units held all the tools and potions one would associate with car care: antifreeze, wax polish, oily rags, screwdrivers, spanners. Rothwell had retained the rural look in the other half of the garage. He had even hung old farm implements on the whitewashed stone wall: a mucking rake, a hay knife, a draining scoop, and a tom spade, among others, all suitably rusted. As he stood there, Banks tried to picture what might have happened. The victim had clearly been kneeling, perhaps praying or pleading for his life. It certainly didn't look as if he had tried to escape. Why had he submitted so easily? Not much choice, probably, Banks thought. You usually don't argue when someone is pointing a shotgun at you. But still, would a man simply kneel there, brace himself, and wait for his executioner to pull the trigger? Banks turned and left the barn. Outside, he met Detective Sergeant Philip Richmond and Detective Constable Susan Gay coming from around the back. "Nothing there, sir, as far as I can tell," said Richmond, a large torch in his hand. Susan, beside him, looked pale in the glow from the barn entrance. "All right?" Banks asked her. "I'm okay now, sir. I was sick, though." Richmond looked the same as ever. His sang-froid was legendary around the place, so much so that Banks sometimes wondered if he had any feelings at all, or whether he had come to resemble one of those computers he spent most of his time with. "Anyone know what happened?" Banks asked. "PC Carstairs had a quick word with the victim's wife when he first got here," said Susan. "All she could tell him was that a couple of men were waiting when she got home, and they took her husband outside and shot him." She shrugged. "Then she became hysterical. I believe she's under sedation now, sir. I fished his wallet from his pocket anyway," she went on, holding up a plastic bag. "Says his name's—" "Yes, I know," said Banks. "Have we got an exhibits officer yet?" "No, sir," Susan answered. Then both she and Phil Richmond looked away. Exhibits officer was one of the least popular jobs in an investigation. It meant keeping track of every piece of possible evidence and preserving a record of continuity. It usually went to whoever was in the doghouse at the time. "Get young Farnley on the job, then," Banks said. PC Farnley hadn't offended anyone or cocked up a case, but he lacked imagination and had a general reputation around the station as a crashing golf bore. Clearly relieved, Richmond and Susan wandered off toward the scene of crime team, who had just pulled into the farmyard in a large van. As they piled out in their white boiler suits, they looked like a team of government scientists sent to examine the alien landing spot. Pretty soon, Banks thought, if they weren't all careful, there would be a giant spider or a huge gooey blob rolling around the Yorkshire Dales, gobbling up everyone in sight. The night was cool and still, the air moist, tinged with a hint of manure. Banks still felt half asleep, despite the shock of what he had seen in the garage. Maybe he was dreaming. No, he thought of Sandra, warm at home in bed, and sighed. Detective Superintendent Gristhorpe's arrival at about 3:30 brought him out of his reverie. Gristhorpe limped over from his car. He wore an old donkey jacket over his shirt, and he clearly hadn't bothered to shave or comb his unruly thatch of grey hair.
"Bloody hell, Alan,"
he said by way of greeting.
"That looks like Columbo."
"There's the pot